Day of the Diesels, the Movie Storybook. One day on the island of Sodor, Thomas was puffing along the main line when he saw a scary sight. Dark grey smoke and bright orange flames were coming out of an old farm shed. Fire! Thomas peeped in alarm. Over here, Thomas! Called his best friend Percy, who was helping to fight the fire. We need more water! So Thomas pulled up and let the fireman take bucketfuls of water out of his boiler to throw on the flames. But the fire would not go out. Thomas and Percy wheezed with worry. The Fat Controller was worried too. We must not let the fire spread, he told the engines. Sodor will be in danger. Suddenly, a big blue engine named Belle arrived, ringing her brass bell. Clang, clang! I can help, she said bravely. With a rumble and a rush, then a gurgle and a gush, water shot out of two spouts high on Belle's tanks and onto the flames. Thomas and Percy were very surprised. With Belle's extra water, the fire was soon put out. You are all really useful engines, the Fat Controller smiled. Thomas, you are to show Belle around Sodor today. Percy, your mail trucks are waiting. Percy was disappointed as he watched Thomas and Belle puff off, talking and laughing. Later, he ran into them at the steamworks, but they chuffed off together before Percy could even peep hello. At Tidmouth Sheds that night, Percy was eager to talk to Thomas about the fire. But Thomas and Belle were tired from their tour of Sodor and went straight to sleep. The next day, Percy saw Thomas and Belle at the docks. Belle and I are taking the children to the seaside. Goodbye, Percy, peeped Thomas. Diesel slid up on the next track as Percy sadly watched them go. Your best friend doesn't have time for you anymore, Diesel said. You should find a new friend who does. Diesels were devious, but Percy knew Diesel was right. If you came to the Diesel Works, you'd be a very special visitor, Diesel remarked as he rolled away. My friend will have lots of time for you. Percy felt lonelier than ever. He went to meet Diesel's friend at the Diesel Works. It was a very old and dirty place. Suddenly, a dark shape slid out of the shadows. It was Diesel 10. Welcome, Percy, he smiled. Diesel has been telling me all about you. You're a very special engine. Come in. Diesel 10's words raced round and round Percy's rods. Thomas may not think Percy was special, but Diesel 10 did. With his wheels wobbling nervously every inch of the way, Percy followed Diesel 10 into the Diesel Works. Percy couldn't believe his eyes. The Diesel Works was grimy, but it was full of diesels that he had never seen before. Tell us about yourself, Percy, said Diesel 10. I pull the mail trucks, he told the diesels. A very important job, Diesel 10 smiled, and that made Percy feel very special. One by one, the diesels introduced themselves. He met Den, Dart, Salty, Paxton, Norman, and Sydney. Now Percy had lots of new friends. If we're poorly, Den tries to fix us. But our diesel works is so old and run down, we don't even have a crane, said Salty. Percy frowned. Did you ask for a new diesel works? Yes, but the Fat Controller only cares about steamers, said Diesel 10 sadly. An idea flew into Percy's funnel. I can ask Thomas to tell the Fat Controller. He always listens to Thomas. That's a good idea, Percy. Thank you, Diesel smiled. Soon after, Percy left the diesel works with his boiler bubbling. He was happy to help his new friends. Meanwhile, a new fire engine arrived at the docks. He and Belle would take part of the new rescue team on the island. The other engines were excited to meet him. Cranky the Crane lifted him off the boat. "I've never seen an engine like you before," he growled. Flynn's the name," the bright red engine laughed. The Fat Controller asked Thomas to take Flynn around Sodor and introduce him to the other engines. Later, Percy found Thomas and the other engines at the steamworks. He wanted to tell them about the diesels. Everyone would think he was very special then. But before he could peep a word, Percy saw Flynn the fire engine. With his shiny red paint and fancy fire tools, Flynn looked fast and fearless. Thomas whistled, "The children are waiting to meet you, Flynn." He and Flynn quickly rushed off together. Once again, Percy watched his best friend go. "I'm not big and brave like Belle, or fast and fearless like Flynn, but Diesel 10 thinks I'm important," he thought. Just then, he saw Kevin and remembered what Salty had told him. "Kevin, the Diesels are really friendly," peeped Percy, "but they need a crane. If you went to the Diesel works, you'd be a hero." "Heaving hooks! I've never been called a hero before. I'll do it!" cried Kevin. That night, Percy went to ask Thomas to talk to the Fat Controller. He didn't want to let his new friends down. But when he arrived at the sheds, Percy screeched to a stop. Flynn was in Percy's berth, right next to Thomas. "Hello, Percy! Thomas said I could ease my axles here," said Flynn brightly. Percy was very upset. Then he looked at Thomas. He didn't feel like Percy's best friend anymore. "You can stay in my place," Percy said to Flynn as he backed away. "I'm very busy." He decided to help his new friends that night. Taking a flatbed from the sheds, Percy raced to the steamworks. "Kevin, I'm taking you to the diesel works right now," said Percy. And before Kevin knew it, he was on the flatbed and being taken inside the diesel works. "Welcome, Kevin!" cried Diesel 10. "You're a real hero to us diesels." Kevin beamed happily as he wheeled off to help Den. But Diesel 10 was cross that Percy hadn't talked to Thomas yet. "You must bring Thomas here. Then he'll have to listen." "Yes, I'll bring Thomas," Percy said, his wheels wobbling. The next morning, Percy clubbed into Knapford Station. "Percy, where have you been all night?" asked Thomas. "With my new friends, the Diesels," Percy puffed proudly. "The Diesels!" cried the other engines, their boilers bubbling over in shock. Just then, Gordon thundered into the station. "Kevin's missing from the steamworks!" he wheezed. Percy smiled. "He's being really useful at the diesel works." "Cinders and ashes!" puffed Thomas. "The Diesels have stolen Kevin! We must tell Victor right away." At the steamworks, Percy finally had everyone's attention. "The diesel works is old and run down," he said. "They don't even have a crane. They need Kevin." Victor was upset. "I need Kevin too," he said. Percy looked to Thomas for help, but his best friend was talking to Flynn. That made Percy feel very cross. "If you want Kevin back, then Thomas must go to the diesel works to fetch him," he peeped loudly. As Thomas whistled in surprise, Victor screamed, "The Fat Controller must know about this!" and whooshed out. Percy raced to the diesel works. "Thomas will be here soon, but Victor's gone to tell the Fat Controller," he said. "Very good, Percy," said Diesel 10 slyly. Now we can take over the steamworks, and you will lead us. Then the Bat Controller will listen to us, and you will be our hero. Just then, Thomas arrived looking for Kevin. "Hello, Thomas," said Diesel 10. He clashed his claw, tossing sparks around. "Dan and Dart will take you to the back shed." "Help me, Percy!" cried Thomas as he was shunted away. "He and I are busy, aren't we?" smiled Diesel 10. "Yes," Percy peeped, feeling very grand, and with that he led the Diesels in a roaring charge to the steamworks. Arriving at the steamworks, Percy waited for the Diesels to call him their hero. But they didn't take any notice of him at all. "Ha ha ha! The steamworks is ours! We'll never give it back!" Diesel 10 laughed. Percy shook with surprise. "You have to give it back after the Fat Controller gives you a new Diesel Works," he peeped. "No, we don't! Out of my way, you silly steamy!" cackled Diesel 10, whizzing past. The Diesels were biffing into buffers and twirling on the turntable. "Silly steamy! Silly steamy!" they laughed. "Bust my buffers," moaned Percy. "Thomas is trapped and the Diesels have stolen the steamworks. And it's all my fault." Percy knew he had to fix his mistakes. "I can't rescue the steamworks on my own, but I can rescue Thomas." He steamed to the Diesel Works. But before he could find Thomas, he saw flames inside the main shed. "Fire! I must fetch Belle and Flynn," he cried. With his pistons pumping, Percy sped to the Sodor Search and Rescue Centre to alert them. Belle clanged her bell as Flynn honked and hooted. "I'm ready and raring to rescue," he cried. "We have no time to lose," said Percy. At the Diesel Works, Percy raced straight to the back shed. Dan and Dart were blocking Thomas's track to keep him inside. "Let Thomas go," urged Percy. "We have our orders from Diesel 10, said Dart. "Don't be silly," barked Percy. "Hurry, the shed is on fire." The two Diesels saw the danger and fled, leaving the way clear for Thomas. Percy quickly coupled up to Kevin's flatbed, and the three friends steamed out of the shed. "Thank you for rescuing me, Percy." "Thank you for rescuing me," peeped Thomas. The engines went to the front of the Diesel Works and saw that the fire had grown much bigger. The flames hissed and fizzled and flickered and flashed. Through the swirling smoke, they saw Belle and Flynn fearlessly fighting the fire. "Heaving hooks," said Kevin. "I've never seen a fire before. It's scary." "Stay back. Stay calm. No cause for alarm," shouted Flynn. Thomas, Percy and Kevin stayed safely behind the fire engines. They watched as Belle's two spouts and Flynn's long hose soaked the fire with powerful jets of water. Finally, the fire went out. The Diesel Works were saved. "Hooray for Flynn!" cheered Percy. "Hooray for Belle!" cheered Thomas. With the fire out, Percy remembered the other danger. "The Diesels have taken over the steamworks, Thomas." "Don't worry, Percy. We'll fetch all our friends. Then we'll whoosh and we'll whoosh, and we'll win back the steamworks," chuffed Thomas. "Come on, Kevin," Percy cried. "We're taking you home." The two friends raced along the rails, with Kevin rolling and rattling on the flatbed. First, they told Edward and Henry. Next, they found Gordon and James. Then, they fetched Emily and Toby. Together, with steam trailing behind them, the engines flew down the tracks. They were going to save the steamworks. Just like he had done with the Diesels, Percy led his steam engine friends to the steamworks. Inside, the Diesels were still making a dreadful mess. "Whoop!" cried Paxton as he heaved on a hoist. "Whee!" said Diesel 10 as he spun on the turntable. When the steam engines charged in, the Diesels were very surprised. "The steamworks is ours now!" sneered Diesel 10. "No, the steamworks is ours. Taking it from us is not right," Thomas replied. "You tricked me," Percy told the Diesels, "but we won't trick you. We want to help." Clank! Diesel 10 snapped his claw loudly. "How will you help us?" he asked suspiciously. "We will tell the Fat Controller that the Diesels need a new diesel works," promised Thomas. Just then, the Fat Controller walked in. "Diesel 10!" he boomed. "What do you think you are doing?" I, Diesel 10 stammered. "You have damaged the diesel works and the steam works, and because of the confusion you have caused, none of my engines is being really useful," said the Fat Controller crossly. Diesel 10 looked at the ground, whimpering. Percy bravely puffed his biggest puff and said, "Sir, Diesel 10 behaved badly because the diesel works is old and dirty. It's grimy and greasy," whistled Thomas. "They don't even have a crane," added Kevin. "May the Diesels have a new diesel works?" Thomas asked. The Fat Controller looked at the Diesels sternly. "Of course you will have a new diesel works, but everyone must wait their turn. You will see that some things are worth waiting for." Soon the rebuilding of the diesel works began, and the Steamies and the Diesels all worked together. It was very rough, tough work, but each day they all huffed and puffed their hardest. Diesel 10, Paxton and Salty shunted trucks here and there, while Den and Dart rattled and rolled along so fast they became quite dizzy. Thomas and Percy worked side by side. Their fireboxes fizzled and their boilers bubbled as they laughed together. Henry and James pushed and pulled trucks along the rails. Gordon and Emily whistled as they worked in the yard. With so much work to do, the Diesels were grateful for the steam engine's help. At last, the new diesel works was finished. It had bright yellow paint and a shiny new sign. All the Diesels gathered in front, feeling very proud of their diesel works. "This is a very special building," said the Fat Controller. Not because it is new and grand, but because it shows what happens when really useful engines work together. You are all very special and important engines, and I am proud of you all," finished the Fat Controller. "Hear, hear," said Lady Hat. Then the Steamies and the Diesels made a great cheering noise with lots of whistling and honking. Everyone joined in, even Diesel 10. Later, puffing back to the sheds, Percy said, "Thomas." "Yes, Percy?" "When I'm with you, I feel most proud of all, and most special of all," Percy chuffed happily. Thomas beamed from buffer to buffer. "That's exactly how I feel when I'm with you." The engines laughed together as only best friends can.